A fateful phone call, a peaceful farm suddenly transforms into a massive construction site. The quiet, unassuming farmer, away for medical treatment, returns to find his ancestral property brazenly seized. Who is behind this conspiracy? They severely underestimated the silent man, and the price they'll pay will be unbelievable. Don't miss what happens next. Colton Hayes always understood the value of silence, but no one ever suspected that it was also a veil for a quiet, fierce power. In his old wooden farmhouse, nestled amidst 150 acres where generations of family memories had taken deeper root than the ancient oak trees, the jarring roar of heavy machinery from the edge of his property suddenly ripped through the peace. It wasn't the familiar sound of a tractor or the chirping of birds, but the growl of steel monsters, tearing up the land without permission. Neighbors, accustomed to Colton's simple, almost reclusive life, merely shrugged. They knew Colton had been away for nearly 2 months, undergoing treatment for a chronic illness at a distant medical center, entrusting his farm to a reliable manager. But this manager, a devoted yet gentle old man, had not anticipated the audacity of Meredith Langford, the powerful Home Owners Association HOA president, a woman with foresight but utterly devoid of ethics. Meredith, with her elegant demeanor but eyes as cold as steel, had long been quietly plotting her expansion of power and wealth. That land has been abandoned, Meredith had declared with self-satisfaction in closed HOA meetings, where she held absolute sway. Colton Hayes has disappeared. A single man, no children, living in isolation. He must have abandoned it. That lie, skillfully woven, had infiltrated the minds of naive HOA members, those solely focused on immediate profit, disregarding traditional values or fairness. Little did they know, abandoned in Meredith's definition meant anything that didn't directly generate money for her. Meredith Langford was no ordinary woman. She was a shrewd real estate investor, having transformed many potential plots into massive profitable ventures. As HOA president, she held the powerful card to manipulate regulations, bending rules to her will. She painted a dazzling vision of a high-end resort, complete with luxurious villas, an exquisite golf course, and an infinity pool overlooking majestic mountain views, all to be built on Colton's 150 acres. She promised colossal profits, an elevation of property values for the entire area, blinding the HOA members. Within 2 months, under Meredith's direction, a silent yet audacious assault unfolded. Secret contracts were signed between the HOA and an anonymous investor, actually a shell company of Meredith herself. Construction permits were fast-tracked through shady channels at the urban planning department, where corrupted officials were either blind by promises of gain or intimidated by Meredith's influence. A massive construction crew, with colossal bulldozers and rumbling trucks, swiftly appeared, transforming the peaceful fields into a chaotic construction zone. Trees were mercilessly felled, dirt roads were carved out, and foundations for concrete structures began to be laid. Not a single person in the HOA, even those who signed the contracts, truly bothered to verify the legal status of the land. They were swept up in the fever of profits Meredith had conjured. A few conscientious individuals raised questions, but were immediately silenced by Meredith with stern words about community benefit and economic development. She even presented fabricated evidence that Colton was no longer capable of managing his property, even implying he might have passed away abroad. Meredith's tight control over information and the lack of transparency in meetings created a perfect veil for her conspiracy. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Colton Hayes was quietly recovering. As a former real estate attorney, he understood the importance of protecting assets, especially one with such historical and sentimental significance as his family farm. He had anticipated covetous eyes on his land, especially from opportunistic schemers. Therefore, before leaving, Colton had done everything in his power to protect the farm. He had registered detailed protective maps at the land registry office, a complex but extremely effective legal procedure ensuring no one could change the land's purpose without his consent. He had also installed dozens of hidden surveillance cameras throughout the farm, connected directly to a secure server in a remote location, and backed up his entire land use history on multiple storage devices, from old ownership papers to encrypted digital records. This included documents proving ownership, precise boundary drawings, and other legal instruments related to protecting the property from encroachment or seizure. He knew that in the world of real estate, paper was king, and he had prepared an unassailable kingdom of documents. During his final days at the hospital, as his health gradually returned, Colton maintained his habit of checking the farm's data. He saw vague images of disturbances, strange vehicles moving, but he assumed it was just normal activity from his manager or gardeners. He didn't realize that beneath that peaceful facade, a storm had risen, threatening to engulf everything he held dear. When Colton returned, his old pickup truck turned onto the familiar dirt road leading to the farm. He slammed on the brakes. Before him was no longer the lush green fields or dense trees he had known his whole life. Instead, it was a scene of desolation and horror. Tens of acres had been bulldozed. Ancient oak trees lay haphazardly felled, and in the center of the farm, a colossal concrete structure was rising, with steel pillars reaching proudly skyward, a symbol of a high-end resort construction project in full swing. The piercing roar of drills and bulldozers echoed through the valley, drowning out the familiar sounds of wind and birds. Colton stepped out of his truck, his eyes betraying no anger or shock, but a terrifying stillness. His face, already weathered by years, now became even harder. He watched the workers rushing about, the trucks constantly bringing in materials, and the gleaming billboards advertising Paradise Point Resort and Spa already erected right on his land. That name, the name Meredith Langford had confidently advertised, now felt like a direct insult to his family's legacy. "What the hell is going on here?" Colton's manager, old Mr. Jenkins, stammered as he ran up, his face pale with fear and helplessness. I don't know what to do. Colton, they said they had all the papers. They said this land now belongs to the HOA. Colton didn't answer. He just stared at the rising structure, his eyes seemingly scanning every detail, every brick, every steel beam. He had seen this before. In his legal career, land seizures, cunning investor schemes, but he never thought it would happen to him, to the land he had spent his life protecting. He sighed a heavy sigh, filled with disappointment but no despair. Deep within his mind, a cold spark began to ignite. Meredith Langford and her accomplices had made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had woken a sleeping lion. And he, Colton Hayes, would not get angry. He would simply take the files to court. Colton Hayes, the man whose quietude was perpetually mistaken for weakness, didn't need to shout, didn't even need to raise his voice. The sight of his desecrated land, the relentless, grinding crescendo of machinery devouring his heritage, forged a resolve within him far deeper than any fleeting burst of anger. His silence, often misconstrued as indifference, was, in fact, the calculated accumulation of power, a strategic masterpiece honed over decades as a seasoned real estate attorney. He knew the Byzantine complexities of property law, the nuanced distinctions that separated legal ownership from perceived abandonment, and the ironclad protections afforded to those who diligently guarded their rights. "They didn't just build on my land, Jenkins," Colton stated, his voice a low, steady rumble, barely audible above the destructive symphony. "They built on a legal minefield, and they just tripped the first wire." Mr. Jenkins, trembling visibly, could only offer a shaky nod. He had been a bewildered bystander, witnessing Meredith Langford's relentless charm offensive, her silver-tongued rhetoric about community upliftment in the supposed eyesore that was Colton's traditional farm. He had even, reluctantly, been swayed by the official-looking permits in the shocking speed with which the construction had commenced. He didn't grasp the intricate legal might of a Bando Bao protected map or the undeniable weight of Lich Sequin Sudongdat land use history that Colton spoke of. To him, the tangible act of construction, the sheer towering scale of the project, seemed an insurmountable, irreversible reality. What, what can we do? Colton, he stammered, his eyes wide with fear. It's already so enormous. Colton turned, his gaze sweeping over the sprawling, half-formed monstrosity, then settling on the weathered porch of his farmhouse, a sanctuary now threatened by concrete and greed. We retrieved the evidence. Jenkins, all of it. His first call was to his personal lawyer, Evelyn Reed, a woman whose legal mind was a finely tuned weapon, sharp, unyielding, and legendary for her meticulous preparation and ruthlessly strategic litigation. Evelyn, unlike Jenkins, understood Colton implicitly when he calmly, methodically detailed the scene, stripping away all emotional descriptors. Her initial surprise didn't last a second. It morphed, instantly, into a cold, professional determination that made the hairs on Jenkins' neck stand on end. Are you absolutely certain about the filings? Colton? The surveillance? She pressed, her voice tight with an almost predatory anticipation. Every last detail, Colton confirmed, a faint, almost imperceptible flicker of grim satisfaction in his tone. They walked right into it. Evelyn, blindly. Within a terrifyingly swift 72 hours, Colton's farmhouse transformed from a rural dwelling into a covert legal command center. Evelyn and her hand-picked team descended, their efficiency chilling. They swiftly established an independent, secure network, drawing power from a hidden generator to access the encrypted data from Colton's surveillance system. The cameras, dozens of them, were not just strategically placed but almost imperceptible, camouflaged within ancient trees, under eaves, and even buried discreetly beneath overgrown shrubs. They had captured everything: the initial invasive surveying, the brutal arrival of heavy machinery, the mournful crash of ancient trees as they were felled without mercy, the daily, relentless progress of the construction crew, and crucially, the frequent, supremely confident visits of Meredith Langford herself, often accompanied by key HOA board members, their faces alight with predatory glee. The crystal-clear timestamps, the high-resolution visuals, and the sheer overwhelming volume of data were undeniable. These weren't just random images. They were a meticulously documented, damning timeline of premeditated, illegal encroachment. Simultaneously, Evelyn's team delved into the seemingly impenetrable layers of public records. There, they found Colton's meticulously filed Bando Bauho, a specialized land protection map that, in this state, served as an unassailable declaration of intent in protected boundaries, rendering any unauthorized development a clear, irrefutable legal violation. They cross-referenced this with his Lich Suquien Sudungdet, a comprehensive ledger of ownership, taxes paid, and traditional usage that dated back generations, solidifying his claim beyond any conceivable doubt. Meredith's arrogant, baseless claim of abandoned land didn't just crumble. It disintegrated under the suffocating weight of this irrefutable documentation. Property law, especially regarding real estate, mandates a clear, undeniable intent to relinquish all rights for it to be truly abandoned. The dormancy period for property to be deemed abandoned and turned over to the state in the U.S. typically takes at least 2 years, a threshold Meredith hadn't even approached. Furthermore, title to real estate, or a fee simple, cannot simply be relinquished by mere abandonment. Colton's continuous, well-documented payment of taxes and meticulous record-keeping didn't just negate her claim, they obliterated it. When Evelyn filed the initial injunction to halt construction and the subsequent lawsuit for unlawful trespass and astronomical damages, Meredith Langford initially responded with a dismissive, patronizing scoff, a scare tactic, nothing more, she publicly declared to the HOA board, her carefully coiffed blonde hair gleaming under the chandelier in the opulent community center. Colton Hayes is a ghost, a reclusive relic. He probably doesn't even remember what he owns anymore. This is just a desperate, futile attempt to slow down progress, to extort us. Her loyal, sycophantic supporters, blinded by the promised shimmering returns on their investments, and the irresistible allure of a new luxury resort, echoed her sentiments like a Greek chorus. They saw Colton as an archaic obstructionist, a stubborn, sentimental fool standing squarely in the way of a glittering, profitable future. Meredith had even used her substantial influence within the local media to subtly, yet relentlessly, paint Colton as an eccentric, anti-development Luddite, further isolating him in the public eye and poisoning the well of opinion. However, the tide began its insidious turn when the court, with unprecedented speed, granted the injunction. A formal, unequivocal cease and desist order was served on the construction site, hitting the massive project like a thunderclap. Halting it mid-stride, the deafening roar of machinery, which had been the relentless soundtrack of Meredith's ambition, fell into an unnerving, sudden silence. Workers stood idle, their faces etched with confusion and dawning apprehension. The abrupt cessation of work sent a seismic ripple of unease through the HOA members, who had invested heavily, both financially and emotionally, in Meredith's grandiose, gilded vision. Calls to Meredith's office began to flood in, a relentless torrent of anxious inquiries demanding explanations. Meredith, though privately seething, maintained a facade of icy composure. She plastered on a reassuring smile for her investors and the HOA board, assuring them this was merely a procedural hiccup, a minor, easily surmountable hurdle. "We have the proper permits, every single one," she insisted, waving a stack of documents that, to the untrained eye, looked perfectly legitimate, ironclad. Colton is just a bitter, senile old man, trying to cause trouble, clinging to a bygone era. His claims are baseless, utterly without merit. He abandoned that land years ago. Her confidence, though entirely manufactured, was still dangerously infectious, momentarily placating her nervous constituents. She even contacted her own legal team, a notoriously formidable corporate law firm known for its aggressively brutal tactics and bottomless pockets, instructing them to bury Colton Hayes in paperwork until he drowns in it. She truly believed her deep-seated influence within the local bureaucracy, coupled with her seemingly limitless financial might, made her utterly untouchable, beyond the reach of any petty old farmer. But Meredith's fatal flaw, her Achilles heel, was her crippling overconfidence, her absolute inability to fathom that anyone could be more prepared, more meticulous, more strategically brilliant than she was. She had meticulously built her empire on manipulating information, exploiting perceived weaknesses, and bending reality to her will. She had utterly failed to grasp that Colton Hayes' simple and quiet life was not a sign of weakness, but a brilliantly constructed shield, behind which lay the razor-sharp mind of a highly intelligent and strategically brilliant legal veteran. The first hearing was not just a legal proceeding, it was a public spectacle, drawing every local news outlet and scores of curious onlookers eager to witness the clash. Meredith arrived impeccably dressed, radiating an aura of polished, unassailable authority, a queen surveying her temporary subjects. Colton, in stark contrast, appeared in a simple, well-worn suit, his demeanor calm, almost serenely detached. Evelyn Reed, however, was anything but calm. Her opening statement was a masterclass in legal precision, concise, impossibly sharp, and laced with an undeniable, chilling legal authority. She didn't just present, she unleashed the registered land protection map, the meticulously detailed land use history, and initial, devastating excerpts from the surveillance footage showing the clear, undeniable commencement of unauthorized construction after Colton's departure and without his consent. The raw, unfiltered images, projected onto the courtroom screen, bulldozers tearing through Colton's ancient, beloved orchards, trees crashing to the ground like fallen giants, elicited gasps of outrage from the gallery, a collective shudder of revulsion. Meredith's legal team, led by a slick, preening, and arrogantly dismissive lawyer named Mr. Sterling, immediately launched their counterattack, attempting to discredit Colton, to paint him as a disgruntled, greedy individual seeking to extort money. Mr. Hayes abandoned this property for months, Your Honor, Sterling declared, his voice dripping with condescension, allowing it to fall into egregious disrepair. The HOA, in its benevolent role as guardians of this community's prosperity, merely sought to revitalize a neglected, blighted asset for the betterment of the entire community. He even produced a carefully fabricated timeline of Colton's supposed neglect, a flimsy construct of lies. But Evelyn was not just ready. Oh, my, she was poised. She not only produced Colton's irrefutable medical records confirming his necessary absence for treatment, proving it was not abandonment but a temporary, well-documented hiatus, but then she introduced the first earth-shattering bombshell. Your Honor, we also possess extensive photographic and video evidence, captured by a network of state-of-the-art security cameras installed by Mr. Hayes before his departure, showing the meticulous upkeep of the farm, daily visits by his dedicated caretaker, and then, suddenly, shockingly, the unauthorized commencement of construction. Then came the twist, the electrifying, devastating revelation that would irrevocably shatter Meredith's carefully constructed world and alter the course of the lawsuit forever. Evelyn, with a quiet, lethal click of a remote, presented a segment of the surveillance footage, a clip she had chosen with surgical precision for its sheer, undeniable impact. It showed Meredith Langford herself, weeks into the illegal construction, standing directly on Colton's private property, her back to one of Colton's hidden cameras, gesturing expansively towards the partially built, towering monument to her greed. Her voice, amplified by a sensitive microphone hidden nearby, was perfectly, horrifyingly clear, echoing through the stunned courtroom. She was speaking to a group of beaming investors, her voice dripping with venomous condescension and chilling certainty. That old hermit, Hayes, she sneered, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. He's probably rotting away in some distant clinic, his mind gone. He won't know what hit him until it's far too late. By then, this resort will be a towering monument to our foresight. Our brilliance and his so-called heritage will be nothing but a meaningless, forgotten footnote in the annals of progress. The camera then, with almost artistic timing, panned slightly, catching a fleeting, chillingly smug smirk on her face as she looked directly towards the hidden lens, almost as if acknowledging a silent, unseen triumph, convinced of her untouchability. The implication was not just clear, it was a brutal, undeniable fact she knew about the cameras, or at least suspected they were there, and she believed, with every fiber of her arrogant being, that she had outsmarted them all. The courtroom fell into an immediate, deathly silence, so profound that the whir of the projector seemed deafening. Meredith's face, usually a mask of impenetrable composure, contorted instantly with a horrifying mixture of shock, dawning terror, and a fleeting, incandescent rage. Sterling, her slick, arrogant lawyer, literally froze mid-gesture, a visible bead of sweat tracing a path down his temple. The chilling smugness on Meredith's face in the video, juxtaposed with her earlier public statements about Colton's supposed abandonment, was not merely a damning piece of evidence. It was a self-inflicted wound, a direct, irrefutable confession of her malicious intent, caught on her target's own property. She had not only acknowledged the cameras, but had brazenly, foolishly gloated, convinced she was untouchable. This revelation instantly, brutally, shifted the public perception of Meredith from a shrewd, visionary businesswoman to a predatory, contemptible opportunist. The supporting characters, the construction crew, now looking utterly lost and betrayed, and even some of the HOA members present in the courtroom, began to look at Meredith with a visceral mixture of disbelief, disgust, and a rapidly escalating resentment. The sheer, unadulterated arrogance of her statement, captured with such brutal clarity on video, was not just a public relations nightmare. It was a catastrophic legal death blow. The terms Phong Vien Du Tra investigative reporter and So Quy Hoch Do Thai urban planning department are in Vietnamese. Below, they are replaced with their English equivalents, and the passage is slightly refined for clarity while maintaining the original structure and tone. The raw, unflinching revelation of Meredith's video didn't just crack her carefully constructed facade, it shattered it, sending 1,000 glittering, deadly fragments scything through the courtroom. The air crackled, charged with collective, visceral outrage that erupted in gasps, angry murmurs, and the relentless clicking of cameras. Meredith's face, usually a masterpiece of glacial self-control, twisted into a horrifying tableau of shock, disbelief, and incandescent rage. Her calculating eyes darted wildly, like a trapped animal, seeking escape from the searing truth on the massive screen. Mr. Sterling, her once formidable lawyer, a man of unholy unflappability, recoiled, a tremor shaking his tailored suit. The call for adjournment wasn't strategic. It was a desperate plea for air, a flimsy raft in a drowning abyss. The judge's gaze, sharp as a scalpel, cut through Meredith, granting the reprieve but warning of sanctions with a voice icy as an Arctic gale. Meredith Langford was no longer a queen. She was prey. The hunt was on. Outside, the media erupted into a bloodthirsty frenzy. Flashes popped like machine gun fire. Microphones jammed into Meredith's contorted face, and questions hammered her. Is that your voice, Ms. Langford? Did you believe he was rotting away? Are you a fraud? A criminal? Her coiffed blonde hair wilted. Her designer suit looked cheap, and her public image disintegrated, replaced by a snarling, terrified visage plastered across news outlets. Headlines screamed, HOA queen exposed. He won't know what hit him. A tycoon's treachery caught on camera in Paradise Point, built on lies and malice, drenched in corruption. The public, once seduced by her visions, recoiled in disgust. The luxury resort was no longer progress. It was a monument to deceit, a wound on the community's soul. At Colton's unassuming farmhouse, the war room vibrated with lethal calm. Evelyn's elite team, fueled by coffee and righteous indignation, moved with predatory precision. Colton, in the shadows, remained the stoic anchor. This is just the first drop of blood. Evelyn, he murmured. Steady as the oaks Meredith felled. She'll come back swinging. It'll be ugly. A brutal fight. Meredith, true to Colton's prediction, unleashed a savage counteroffensive. Sterling, fighting like a cornered animal, launched a scorched earth campaign to obliterate the video. He paraded expert witnesses, slick academics spinning tales of digital manipulation, voice synthesis, and malicious fabrication. They painted Colton as a cunning recluse, orchestrating a smear campaign for financial gain. The air thickened with their transparent lies. But Evelyn Reed was in another dimension, where truth reigned, anticipating this tactic. Her forensic analyst, a world-renowned titan, surgically dismantled Sterling's fabrications. With irrefutable data, he proved the video's authenticity, pixel by pixel, sound wave by sound wave. Satellite imagery and meteorological data matched the footage's light and shadow, rendering deepfake claims impossible. The integrity of this footage, Your Honor, he concluded, is an unblemished fingerprint of truth, impervious to tampering. The revelation humiliated Sterling, shredding Meredith's credibility. Enraged, Meredith escalated, filing a venomous countersuit accusing Colton of malicious prosecution, emotional distress, and extortion. She leveraged her shadowy influence in local government, calling in favors and issuing threats to retroactively validate her fraudulent permits or fabricate zoning violations on Colton's land. Her compromised allies in the city council whispered about procedural reviews and audits targeting Colton, a clear act of retaliation. But Colton's quiet strength had sprouted a scandal, fueled by the media's unblinking glare. Investigative reporter Sarah Jenkins smelled corruption and plunged in. Her expose was a devastating indictment of systemic rot, unearthing Meredith's questionable land deals, shady zoning variances, and a history of bullying landowners, published in a fiercely independent newspaper. It detailed Meredith's illicit influence, hinting at a corrupt enterprise in the urban planning department. The urban planning department faced unprecedented scrutiny. With the video evidence and media pressure, public outrage demanded accountability. The fast-tracked permits were examined, revealing forged signatures and criminal disregard for protocol, likely bought through bribery. Mid-level officials, facing ruined careers, cooperated with investigators, confirming Meredith's tactics and donations. The department announced a sweeping investigation, throwing Meredith to the wolves. The HOA board imploded. The video halted construction, and legal Armageddon sent panic through members who had gambled their savings. Their investments became a concrete skeleton, a monument to Meredith's deceit. Some rebelled, others demanded audits, confirming Meredith defrauded them, funneling capital into offshore shell corporations. Trust was ground into dust. Colton remained the storm's eye, refusing mudslinging. His rare statements emphasized property rights and heritage, delivered with calm dignity. Evelyn's legal strategy was relentless, presenting ecological devastation, financial losses, and zoning violations. The judge, warned by Meredith's delays, became unyielding. Sarah Jenkins' magnum opus was Meredith's obituary, detailing her predatory acquisitions, compromised officials, and fraud through shell companies. It exploded globally, turning a local dispute into a cautionary tale of corruption. The HOA board, in a suffocating meeting, demanded Meredith's resignation. Her pleas were drowned by jeers. Facing a vote of no confidence in criminal charges, she resigned, her power executed publicly. The lawsuit persisted. The HOA, under new leadership, cooperated, providing documents implicating Meredith's schemes. Evelyn's financial records linked Meredith to bribes, proving a criminal conspiracy. The district attorney launched a criminal investigation into Meredith for fraud, racketeering, and corruption. Meredith, once untouchable, was a pariah, facing a bankrupting lawsuit and prison. The construction site, a half-finished skeleton, crumbled under her hubris. Colton, the quiet farmer, dismantled an empire with foresight, legal acumen, and undeniable evidence. His silent strength roared. The civil trial, once a tense legal battle, had devolved into a grim, inexorable countdown to Meredith Langford's complete annihilation. Gone was the polished veneer, the imperious confidence that had defined her. Meredith, now a gaunt, skeletal figure, her eyes shadowed with a desperate, clinging defiance that flickered like a dying ember, seemed to shrink in the very seat she occupied. Her legal team, now a mere shadow of its former formidable self, a skeletal remnant of what was once a powerhouse, could offer little more than feeble procedural delays, each one summarily and swiftly cut short by a judge whose patience had long since worn thin. Her gaze a silent, searing indictment. The prosecution, spearheaded by Evelyn Reed, was no longer merely a legal strategy. It was a relentless, methodical onslaught. Each piece of irrefutable evidence a perfectly aimed missile, chipping away at Meredith's crumbling defenses until they finally disintegrated into a fine, bitter dust. The courtroom became a theater of truth. Testimonies from the now pragmatically cooperative HOA members, under the sober, reform-minded leadership of a new board, painted a chilling, grim picture of Meredith's autocratic rule, her deliberate obfuscation of vital information, and her outright, systematic manipulation of their trust. They spoke of rushed, shadowy meetings held without proper notice, of financial statements that mysteriously vanished or were conveniently altered, and of Meredith's intimidating, omnipresent persona that crushed any nascent dissenting voice before it could even whisper. Some, their face etched with profound regret and palpable embarrassment, even admitted to being shamefully misled by her confident, glittering assertions, expressing a deep, collective complicity in the ruinous scheme. Their unified, sorrowful testimony added a visceral layer of betrayal and emotional damage that resonated deeply, powerfully, with every single member of the jury, making Meredith's actions not just a legal transgression, but a moral one. the investigative reporter, Sarah Jenkins. Now not just a local hero, but a national figure whose name was on everyone's lips, was called to testify, her presence commanding immediate attention. She presented her comprehensive, meticulously detailed research, unfolding the terrifying breadth of Meredith's predatory practices far beyond the confines of Colton's case. She unveiled a chilling history of similar brazen land grabs, of smaller, more vulnerable families brutally pressured into selling their ancestral lands for a mere fraction of their true worth, their legacies plundered. She spoke of zoning changes pushed through with suspicious, almost supernatural ease, and environmental protections systematically ignored. Her testimony didn't just reveal Meredith as a greedy developer, it exposed her as a systemic threat to property rights, to community integrity, and to the very fabric of fairness and justice. Each revelation, each meticulously documented instance, was a fresh, agonizing wound to Meredith's already shredded reputation, bleeding it dry. The final, devastating, earth-shattering blow came with his testimony of key officials from the Urban Planning Department, now fully reluctantly cooperating with the district attorney's escalating criminal investigation. Under the cold, unforgiving glare of the oath, one former mid-level administrator, granted immunity in exchange for his soul-bearing confession, detailed the systematic, insidious process by which Meredith Langford had bribed, coerced, and brazenly intimidated officials to fast-track her fraudulent permits. He described clandestine, hushed meetings in dimly lit restaurants, envelopes stuffed with crisp, illicit cash exchanged under tables, and thinly veiled threats about career ruination, even personal harm. If her every demand was not met instantly, his testimony provided the crucial, undeniable link, solidifying the iron chain of evidence from Meredith's initial malicious intent to the monstrous, illegal construction itself, exposing the deep-seated, cancerous corruption that had festered within the city, facilitating her grand, depraved scheme. The courtroom didn't just buzz, it erupted with a collective, visceral outrage as the full, sickening extent of Meredith's criminal enterprise was finally, brutally laid bare for all to see. Meredith Langford, when finally called to the stand in her own defense, was a pathetic shadow of her former, imperious self. Her voice, once commanding and assured, was now thin, reedy, and laced with a desperate, almost manic tremor. She attempted to deny everything, to portray herself as an innocent victim of a vengeful, obsessed farmer and a relentlessly biased, sensationalist media. But her denials were hollow, utterly lacking conviction, crumbling into pathetic fragments under Evelyn Reed's relentless, incisive cross-examination. Evelyn systematically presented each piece of evidence, the unassailable protected map, the damning surveillance footage, the irrefutable financial records, the tearful HOA testimonies, the planning department confessions, the chilling expert analyses, weaving them into an undeniable, suffocating tapestry of fraud, conspiracy, and pure, unadulterated malice. Faced with the stark, unyielding, inescapable truth, Meredith's carefully constructed composure finally, spectacularly, cracked. She lashed out, her voice rising in a desperate, unhinged shriek, a primal cry of a cornered beast, accusing Colton of orchestrating a personal, malevolent vendetta, of ruining her for spite. This public outburst, utterly devoid of remorse, credibility, or a shred of human decency, sealed her fate in the eyes of every single juror, their faces hardened with resolve. Colton Hayes remained a pillar of silence throughout the agonizing trial, observing from his seat at the plaintiff's table, a quiet, dignified, almost monumental presence. He felt no exultation, no joyous triumph, only a profound, almost spiritual sense of vindication. His land, his family's legacy, his very identity had been defended, protected, and ultimately redeemed. When Evelyn Reed delivered her closing argument, her voice resonating with power and quiet conviction, she didn't focus on vengeance, She focused on justice, on the sacred sanctity of private property, and on the dangerous, terrifying precedent Meredith's actions had set for every homeowner, every community. She painted Colton not as a man seeking revenge, but as a man defending a fundamental right, a quiet, unassuming hero who had, through foresight, meticulous preparation, and unwavering principle, exposed a deeply rooted, insidious corruption that threatened them all. The jury's deliberation was remarkably, chillingly swift. Their return to the courtroom was marked by a palpable, suffocating tension that hung heavy in the air. The foreperson's voice, clear and unwavering, delivered a verdict that reverberated throughout the state and beyond, an overwhelming, unequivocal victory for Colton Hayes. The court ruled decisively in his favor, finding Meredith Langford and the HOA under its previous, disgraced leadership unequivocally guilty of unlawful trespass, catastrophic property damage, and a systematic pattern of fraudulent, malicious activity. The judge's final pronouncement was clear, cold, and utterly unequivocal. The construction project on Colton's land was declared illegal, a monument to greed, and must be fully dismantled, and the land painstakingly restored to its original, pristine state at the defendant's sole, crushing expense. But the financial damages were what truly sent seismic shockwaves through the community, a devastating financial tsunami that would swallow Meredith whole. The court ordered Meredith Langford and the HOA to pay Colton Hayes compensatory damages for the utter destruction of his property, punitive damages for their malicious, premeditated intent, and full legal fees amounting to a staggering, truly unimaginable, 8-figure sum. This colossal judgment was designed not just to compensate Colton for his immense losses, but to serve as an undeniable, chilling deterrent against similar acts of corporate greed, brazen disregard for law, and contempt for individual property rights. For Meredith, this meant utter, absolute financial ruin. Her vast, illicit fortune, built on years of dubious, unethical dealings in human exploitation, would be entirely liquidated to satisfy the judgment. And even then, it would likely not be enough to cover the staggering amount. She faced immediate, humiliating bankruptcy, the public loss of every asset she possessed, and the complete, irreversible obliteration of her professional reputation, leaving her a pariah in the world she once dominated. The civil victory was followed swiftly, inexorably, by criminal indictments that Meredith had so desperately tried to avoid. The district attorney, now armed with the overwhelming, irrefutable evidence presented in the civil trial and bolstered by the furious public outrage, officially announced sweeping criminal charges against Meredith Langford and several of her key associates for widespread fraud, racketeering, conspiracy, and public corruption. The investigative reporter, Sarah Jenkins, broke the news to a waiting, horrified world, solidifying her reputation as a fearless truth seeker and ensuring Meredith's spectacular downfall was etched into public memory. A cautionary tale for generations. Meredith, once a formidable, untouchable power broker, was now facing not just financial destitution, but the very real, terrifying prospect of a long, ignominious prison sentence. Her days of manipulating the system, of twisting the law to her will, were irrevocably over. The justice system, though slow and ponderous, had finally definitively caught up, its cold, iron grasp closing around her. The half-built hotel, once Meredith's proud, shimmering monument to insatiable greed, now stood as a stark, desolate reminder of her colossal, self-inflicted failure. The new HOA board, stripped of its previous corrupt leadership and facing immense financial penalties that threatened its very existence, had no choice but to comply immediately and fully with the punishing court order. The same heavy machinery that had so brutally torn Colton's land apart was now brought back, not to build, but to systematically dismantle the concrete skeleton, brick by agonizing brick, steel beam by steel beam. The process was agonizingly slow, unimaginably costly, and profoundly, tragically symbolic. Neighbors watched, some with a quiet, bitter relief, others with lingering, simmering resentment over their own lost investments, as the illicit, grotesque structure was slowly, painfully erased from the landscape, a monument to avarice returning to dust. Colton Hayes supervised the painstaking reclamation of his land with the same quiet dignity and unwavering resolve he had shown throughout the entire harrowing ordeal. He worked tirelessly, almost reverently, with dedicated environmental experts and passionate local conservationists to painstakingly restore the ravaged soil, to replant native trees, and to coax the damaged ecosystem back to vibrant life. It was a long, arduous process, a marathon of restoration. But for Colton, it was more than just work. It was a sacred labor of love, a profound healing of the earth, and a quiet, powerful reaffirmation of his ancestral bond with the land. He sought no further glory, no public acclaim, no vengeful spotlight. He simply wanted his farm back, in its rightful, peaceful state, its scarred beauty slowly returning. Meredith Langford's fall was complete, irreversible, and absolute. She lost everything that had defined her, her immense wealth, her vast, insidious influence, her freedom, and her very name became synonymous with corporate malfeasance, a chilling byword for greed and corruption. The very power she had wielded so ruthlessly, so mercilessly, had become the precise instrument of her own undoing, a boomerang of karma. The community, bruised and battered but undeniably wiser, began the slow, arduous process of rebuilding trust within its ranks and implementing stricter, more transparent oversight on its local government and HOA, determined to prevent such a betrayal from ever happening again. Colton Hayes, the quiet farmer, returned to his quiet life, the undisputed, venerable guardian of his ancestral land, the 150-acre farm, once savagely threatened by the dark forces of unbridled greed, now stood as a living, breathing testament to resilience, to the enduring, unyielding power of truth, and to the silent, unyielding strength of a man who, when pushed beyond endurance, chose not to explode in rage, but to meticulously, patiently, and decisively reclaim his legacy, proving beyond any doubt that sometimes the quietest roar is, in fact, the most devastating. His story became a whispered legend, a potent, visceral reminder etched into the soul of the community that even the most formidable, seemingly impregnable empires can crumble into ruin when built on a foundation of lies, deception, and a fundamental, contemptuous disrespect for justice and human dignity. The land, once brutally scarred, began its slow, beautiful journey of healing, blooming once more under the watchful, peaceful, and profoundly grateful gaze of its rightful, quiet owner. The sensational lawsuit has concluded, but its echoes will resonate forever. From a seemingly abandoned plot of land, the truth about greed and resilience has been exposed. Colton Hayes not only claimed justice for himself, but also sent a powerful message about the value of land and legacy. Thank you for following this dramatic story. Please subscribe, like, and comment to support our channel. And don't forget to share this story to inspire truth and justice.